Welcome everyone. First, I will say that this is being recorded. So if you all could mute your lines, I love seeing everybody's shining faces tonight, but I might go off video just because I'm running the slide deck and sometimes it slows down the slide deck a little bit with my pretty face on there too and the camera. But my name is Karen Johnson. I am a senior field representative that works for Nutrena, and I work with the CountryMax stores. We also have on tonight Twain, who you heard a few minutes ago, and we'll let him introduce himself in a minute, and also Kelly. Kelly, you want to say hi and introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Kelly. I'm actually the events coordinator for CountryMax, so I get to coordinate all of these fun seminars and other events that we do. And we are very lucky tonight to have Karen and Twain with us. They are very knowledgeable, and I'm very excited for what they have to offer tonight.
Well, thank you, and thank you for arranging this for us, Kelly. Yes, we're going to be talking about winter poultry care, that W word that not everybody wants to hear about. But just a little review and some housekeeping for you that are not as familiar using Teams. This is kind of what you see on the top of your screen. You'll see the chat function is this little thing in red, and that you can type in any questions, comments, whatever. The video option, you can turn your camera on or off. A slash through it will mean it's off. And then right next to it is your microphone. And if you all would, please mute your lines just so we don't get a lot of feedback. Okay, we'll get started. We already did the introductions. So our agenda tonight, hopefully we cover all these different topics for you. If there's a specific question that pops up, please type it in the chat and we'll make sure we cover it at the end. But we're going to talk about feeding chickens in cold weather, providing shelter, winter parasite control, frostbite, molting, artificial lighting and lighting needed for winter, good and poor winter chicken breeds, and then some waterfowl tips also. So at this point, I'm going to just turn it over maybe to Kelly for a minute and talk about CountryMax's Chick Learning Life page. Go ahead, Kelly.
Yeah, so we have this great resource for everybody just on our website. You can look on the top bar. There is a drop-down menu. I think it says resources or something like that, where you can find Chick Learning Life, Lawn and Garden, birding. So we have a lot of great resources. But this one in particular is great. It actually has a ton of resources from Nutrena that talks about everything you need to know about chickens and all the questions you might have. And then in the springtime, when we have chickens in store, it also will let you know what breeds we have coming in and exactly what stores to get it at. So a really great resource that we've worked really hard on that is free to just check out if you ever have any additional questions or are thinking about purchasing a chick.
Thanks,
chicks,
Kelly.
I should say.
Chicks, yes, chicks plural. Yes, and thank you for all your hard work in putting this together. So at this point, I am going to turn it over to Twain to introduce himself and shut my camera off, and we'll get rolling. Twain?
Hey, everybody. Thank you, Karen. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. My name is Twain Lockhart. You may be wondering what qualifies me to give a seminar like this. I do not have any alphabet behind my name. I'm not a PhD or anything, but I have been raising chickens for a little over 50 years. Kind of dates me. I'm kind of old, so I've been doing it for a real long time. I do not claim to know everything, but I have seen quite a bit. So my goal here tonight, there's no such thing as a dumb question. I hate bullies on Facebook. I absolutely hate that. Maybe you've seen that on some of the poultry pages. That is not the case here. No judgment, no bullying zone. I hate that. Okay, so if you have a question, don't be afraid to ask because you may not be the only one thinking that question. Not only that, everybody was a beginner at one time, including myself, and you should not be ashamed to be a beginner. So I will tell you this. I don't like to read slides. That is not my style. I kind of talk to the slides. I personally find it very, very dull to listen to somebody read slides in a presentation. It's like, dude, you could have sent me an email. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So going into winter, I don't know how many of you free range your birds. If you do, it's going to be a little bit of a change for them. You're going to be providing 100% of their nutrition. So right out of the gate, you're going to notice your feed consumption is going to go up. This is a good time to check. Fall is a great time to check your birds to make sure everybody's got good body condition. Winter is Mother Nature's culling tool. This is how birds that are not in great shape may not make it through the winter. Culling is the term that they use for eliminating a bird or an animal. So fall's a great time. Let's make sure these birds are ready to get into winter. You still have a little bit of time to kind of build them up a little bit if they're not, really ready for it. So next slide, please. So CountryMax has a wide variety of feeds available. They have the country heritage and the country feeds, as well as the nature-wise. The analogy I like to use, not all chicken feed's the same, okay? These are all great brands. They're all great. It's kind of like General Motors. General Motors makes Chevy and Cadillac. These would be kind of like Chevy. They don't have all the bells and whistles, but they're still great, still get you to church on Sunday. Go ahead and go to the next slide. NatureWise is the Cadillac. NatureWise has the functional additives like pre and probiotics, although that is in the country feeds now, but it also has the essential oils. The biggest thing you'll notice difference is when you open the NatureWise, you will smell. It smells like a pizzeria. We didn't put the essential oils in there for that reason. They just help make everything else work better. You're going to see more eggs, bigger eggs, harder eggshells, things like that. I promise you this is not going to be a feed commercial. So just letting you know what's available at CountryMax, and they are priced accordingly. Chevy's less expensive than the Chevrolet, has less bells and whistles. So it just depends on what you want that that feed to do for you. Next slide, please. So we have some specialty layer feeds also that's available at CountryMax. You have the NatureWise Feather Fixer, which is designed for molt. We're going to delve into molt a little bit later. And then there's also waiting for it. Is a Hardy Hen going to pop up?
It is not working for me, Twain.
Okay. So Hardy Hen, there's no picture, but Hardy Hen is a soy-free diet. It's the orange bag there. And it is developed especially to give you a healthier egg. So they call it Hardy Hen because it gives you a heart-healthy egg, better omega-3/6 ratio. So there's those two specialty layer items. Feather Fixer for molt. A lot of people feed it year-round, especially the show people. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. All right, how much will they eat? Well, you're going to see them eat more in the winter, as I mentioned, probably 15 to 20% more. Now, if you weren't free-ranging your birds, you may not see a difference at all because they weren't out picking plant material and bugs and mice and all that kind of stuff. So, but if you were free-ranging them, you will see a increase because you're providing 100% of the nutrition now. The rule of thumb that I use when somebody says, how much will my chickens eat? I go 5 pounds a month. According to this, it's 6 pounds. Okay, 5, 6. It varies by breed, varies by what feed you're feeding. The better feed that you feed, the less they eat. Okay, it's the better quality feed, the less they have to eat. Chickens, unlike a lot of species, self-regulate their diet very, very well. So a lot of times, I don't know if any of you are on Facebook and you watched what happened this past winter, all the craziness, not winter, this past fall, all the craziness, all the conspiracy theories. Eggs were $10 a dozen. Bill Gates was paying the feed companies to put additives in the feed. Donald Trump was paying the feed companies. Hillary was paying, everybody was paying the feed companies to put additives in the feed so that the birds wouldn't lay. Avian influenza was a conspiracy theory that didn't really happen. Guys, I'm here to tell you, I'm in the poultry industry. That really did happen. We lost about 10% of the nation's commercial layers in that avian influenza. So between that, freight, inflation, avian influenza, egg prices just skyrocketed. Okay, so then all the conspiracy theories came out, and I'm going to try and help alleviate that. We may see it again this fall. let's talk about Betty the laying hen real quick. Okay, Betty the laying hen is going to start laying eggs at about 6 months. Give or take, depends on the breed, but right in that neighborhood. So Betty will start laying. Betty will lay through the fall and the winter and all the way around. She'll lay continuously until probably she's about 15 to 18 months of age. And at that point, she's going to drop her feathers and molt. So we used to see posts like, oh my God, Nutrena sucks. I started feeding this feed and they dropped their feathers and they lost all their feathers and they quit laying. Somebody would try to explain it to them and say, no, that's normal. An 18-month-old bird's molting. And then 10 people would shout that one person down with conspiracy theories. It was absolutely crazy. And to be honest with you, Nutrena, came out smelling like a rose because we had just launched a campaign right before that touting 20% more eggs on the NatureWise. So they weren't really coming after us too much, but some of our competitors really got bashed, and wrongfully so. This was just failure to understand the basic physiology of a laying hen. So the common thing I would get from people when I talked to them, even before all this, was I'd say, well, you haven't seen everything in a year. It's usually 2 years that you kind of see the whole cycle with chickens. So people coming into their second year of ownership, you may see your birds molt for the first time and stop laying, because when they molt, they stop laying. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So just trying to let you know what you may be in store for if you see some of this craziness on social media, or if you have birds that are coming into that, why they're going to quit laying. So you still do the scratch, oyster shell, and grit. You do all of that in the wintertime, just like in the summertime. What you may find is they don't eat it, just because if they don't need it, they leave it alone. Oyster shell is a calcium supplement. If they're not laying, they probably won't eat it. Grit, if they're not eating any whole grains or bugs or things like that, if you're only eating pellets and crumbles, they may not need the grit, so they won't eat it. So that's what's kind of cool about chickens, is they self-regulate. So next slide, please. Scratch. Now I see this a lot. I mostly see it when I get down in the Southeast and the Southwest, where they don't really have distinct seasons like we do in the Midwest and the Northeast. People will feed scratch year round. Think of scratch as kind of like eating Cheetos. I mean, yeah, you can, and you could live on it. I just don't know how healthy you would be living on Cheetos. A little bit's fine, in moderation, about 10% of the diet. If you overload them, you're not going to kill the birds, but they're not going to be as healthy as they could be, and they probably won't lay very well at all. If they molt and all you're feeding them is scratch, it's going to take them forever to go through the molting process, and their feathers won't look all that great when they get done. So next slide, please. Water is actually a nutrient. I don't know if you knew that. And it is the most important nutrient for your chickens. I'm sure there was some of this going on with this craziness this past fall. If your birds dehydrate just a little bit, they stop laying. That's one of the first things that happens if they're not getting enough water. If you live like where we live, Northeast, Midwest, that water is probably going to freeze in the wintertime. And if you're not taking care of that, changing it, providing an electric heated water bowl, something where they have water all the time, you could see your egg production drop off or stop. Not to mention the health of the birds is at stake there too. Now, if you don't have electricity to your coop, it gets to be kind of challenging. You may have to go out there a couple of times a day. And realistically, you really are not supposed to keep the water in the coop with them in the wintertime. A lot of people don't even keep it with them in the summertime either. It adds a lot of moisture in the air. So a lot of people will tell you that you keep the water in the run and not in the coop. So they have to actually venture out. It depends on who you talk to on that. We keep ours in the run. I live in Wisconsin. It gets pretty cold. It freezes. The one that we now have an electric heated bowl, and that works really well. We didn't used to have electricity to the coop, and we do now. So I'm also going to warn you about, be careful about running extension cords. That can be kind of dangerous. And the farther you run it, I guess, the more dangerous it gets as a fire hazard. So be careful with that. One of the tricks I've heard people say is they will take the black, like rubberized pans. I'm sure you've seen those. And if those are out in the sun, even though it's cold out, the sun, it will absorb some of the energy from the sun and it will help keep it from freezing. Another trick is to put ping pong balls on the surface. And as they float, it breaks the tension. It makes it harder for that water to freeze. I'm not going to lie, if it's cold enough, they're still going to freeze, but it may keep it liquid longer. So ideally, you have electricity out to your water, so out to your coop. Next slide, please. So trust me when I say this, heat kills far more chickens than cold. If your birds are sheltered and they're out of the elements and dry, the cold is generally not an issue. You think about it, the coldest winter day, you'll still see little birds flying around. And as long as they're dry, they do okay. Your chickens are really, really tough, but they must be kept dry and out of the wind. So that is, I don't like to say that's job one. For me, job one on your coop is predator proofing, but job two is keeping them out of the elements. We tell you how many feathers your chicken has, not because we're being nitpicky, but just so you know, when they molt, they're going to lose about a third of those, maybe half. So if you have 10 chickens and they're all losing a third of 8,500 feathers, that's a lot of feathers to be blowing around in the yard. And that's perfectly normal. It kind of looks like a chicken exploded in your yard, and that is perfectly normal. So don't freak out if you see all those feathers. So again, keep them out of the elements, keep them dry. We live in southern Wisconsin. We had the polar vortex a few years back. We had 45 below zero for about 10 days straight. We have 38 chickens, not a heated coop, no insulation. We did not lose a single bird. Okay. Now, 38 birds do generate quite a bit of heat. They're going to fare better than, let's say, 4 chickens. So keep that in mind. The more chickens you have, the more heat they generate within the coop. But the big key is keeping them dry and out of the elements. So next slide. The reason we don't like you to heat your coop is you'll read about it. It makes the news every year. Somebody burns their coop down. Those lamps that we brood baby chicks with, they were never, ever designed to be hung in the coop for your chickens. And you're always going to have one big fat chicken that's going to decide that she's going to roost up on that thing or he's going to roost on that thing. And they knock it down in the bedding and now you get a fire going. So we really don't recommend you do that. The other reason is you're kind of monkeying with Mother Nature. Your birds will have a chance to acclimatize. Now, where you can run into trouble is say you bring in some chickens from Texas in January and you put them in your coop. They don't have time to acclimatize. Well, yeah, now you may have a problem. But if your birds were hatched and raised in New York, you shouldn't have an issue. They've acclimatized. The exceptions may be some of your tight-feathered bantams, something like that. If you feel like you really need to provide some sort of a heat source, don't do one of those brooding lamps. Do a radiant heater, something like the Brencia or the sweeter heater. But I'm going to tell you guys, they're expensive and they really don't put off that much heat. I've been doing this a real long time. I've never had somebody catch me, years later and say, hey, I saw one of your seminars and you said my birds wouldn't freeze and I had to freeze. I've never had somebody tell me that. They do really, really well in the wintertime if you keep them dry. So next slide, please. So frostbite can be a real issue. Is it deadly? Typically not. You want to be careful. Don't have any metal roosts in your coop where they can roost on it. Anything metal, pipes, anything. That can be deadly just because they can freeze their toes. If they lose their toes, you've pretty much crippled that bird, and you almost have to call that bird. If they lose the comb or the points off their comb or their wattles, typically not the end of the world. In fact, with showbirds, they call it dubbing. They'll actually cut the combs and the wattles off. So that comb is a heat sink. It's designed to help them get through hot summers. A lot of times you can tell by the breed of chicken where it was developed. For example, the white leghorn has really big combs. They were developed in the Mediterranean. They do okay. They do all right in the Northeast, Northwest, or Northeast and the Midwest, but they are more prone to frostbite. So we used to say that you use Vaseline. And the reason I left this in the presentation is to show you that things change. Up until about 10 years ago, Vaseline was still considered, you put that on their combs to prevent frostbite. They've kind of debunked that. They say that's not good. In fact, it may be detrimental. Udder Balm and Bag Balm, much better choice. There's also a product called Musher's Secret. I've never seen it in the store. It's an online thing, but Udder Balm is really, really good, and Bag Balm's the next best thing. And that can help prevent frostbite as well. So next slide, please. So coming into winter, the bugs, they're not smart, but they have instincts. They're instinctively looking for a warm place to go. So they know they need to get on a warm body. So this is a good time. You don't want your birds to go through winter with a bunch of parasites. Lice and mites, they suck blood. You can actually lose birds from that. They get anemic, they get real skinny. And in the cold weather, that's usually a death sentence. So now is a good time to look. So anybody tell me, Karen, for a prize, why is it a good idea to have one white chicken in your flock? And I'm not a fan of white chickens, just to tell you, there's no bad chickens, but I have breeds I like better than others, and I'm not a Leghorn fan. They're just kind of crazy. But why is it a good idea to have one white chicken? This is an old country boy thing. Bag Balm on the feet. I've never put it on the feet. Usually it's the combs and the wattles. The feet, you just have to watch to make sure that they aren't roosting on something metal. Anybody? So if you have one white chicken, let's say Betty's a Leghorn and Betty goes cruising by, and you look at her and you go, wow, Betty's got a really dirty butt. Well, typically that's not dirt. Those are mites. And on a white bird, you can see it almost at a glance. Good news is that's easy to see. The bad news is guess what? If Betty's got them, they all probably have them. So that's kind of the lazy country boy way of the canary in the coal mine. You kind of a barometer. You can tell what's going on. Although it's still a good idea to pick your birds up and check their body conditions before we get into winter, and fan the tail forward towards their head and look around the vent and see if it looks clean. And I'm not talking about poop. I'm talking about it'll look like dirt if they get mites. If you find it on one bird, you need to dust them all. So the poultry dust is what I recommend. Diatomaceous earth, I like it more as a preventative. Put it in the nest boxes, maybe the dust baths. You can also use wood ash in the dust baths. That has a lye in it, and it helps keep the bugs off them. You don't have to put a lot, maybe 10%. If you see an infestation, I just find poultry dust works better. You're going to want to do it twice. Dust them, wait a couple of weeks, and dust them a second time. The reason why you do it twice is if you miss any bugs first time around, they'll be propagating again. So if you hit them twice, you're pretty much guaranteed to get them all. Make sure you put a little bit in their nest box and their dust baths as well. So you may want to wear a mask and possibly goggles for that. It's not deadly, but it's just not something you want to be inhaling and getting in your eyes. And that goes for the diatomaceous earth too. So lice are a little more mobile. Usually I see those under the wings, but mites tend to be a much bigger problem. Anybody tell me where we get those? Why do all chickens end up with these sooner or later? They don't come from the hatchery. Anybody know? For a prize? Yes. Wow, she's getting all the prizes. So wild birds are not your friends when you have chickens. Not only do they bring lice and mites in, they bring disease in. Avian influenza is the big one. They can also bring in CRD, trying to think what the mycoplasma, which is you get a bird and their eyes swell up and they have a cold and, like a cold like symptoms and their eyes swell up. The real downer part about mycoplasma is you can alleviate it with Tylenol and knock down the symptoms, but that bird will probably always carry it. So, all right, so let's go ahead and go to the next slide.
Twain, one question. I'm going to go back to this slide. This garden and poultry dust, yes. Alexis, I believe you were asking, is there a specific brand or anything, or just poultry dust?
It's you want to have poultry on it. So if it just said garden dust, a lot of times you'll see 7 being the active ingredient. or garden dust. No, it's got to have a chicken on it. It's got to be labeled for poultry to be safe. So actually, the best product I have ever done is a product called Elector PSP, and I've never seen that in a store. It's an online thing, and I'm going to warn you, it's like $160 a bottle. But it was developed from the poultry industry, especially for mites, and it is like magic. And a little bit goes a long way, but most of you probably don't have enough chickens to justify buying a bottle of that. So, and I know CountryMax carries the poultry dust, and it works real well too. So.
Twain, do you want to comment a little bit on worming in the fall and what you might look for or recommend?
Oh, yes, we can talk about this. All right, so you will hear pumpkin seeds will deworm chickens, and that will start a fight on just about any poultry farm because there's those like myself that I have heard that since I was a little kid, and I'm old, that there is a amino acid in the shells of pumpkin seeds called cucurbitacin, which will loosen the parasites and make them pass. There's no clinical proof whatsoever that this works, okay? But we've fed pumpkins to our chickens every year after Halloween for years. They like them, it doesn't hurt them, and we don't seem to have any worms. Now, I know that's kind of like saying I eat a Twinkie every day and I don't have cancer, so Twinkies cure cancer, but I think there is something to the pumpkin seed thing. I just don't have any proof. There's no clinical trials. No drug company is going to spend the money to do a clinical trial on something they can't patent. So we have that. Now, the good news is, up until recently, I used to have to do this whole, you probably remember this, Karen, I'd have to do this whole stupid little skit. Let's all pretend we jumped in Doctor Who's magic phone booth and we teleport to England and we go to the vet in England, and I would do a really horrible English accent, and I would ask, what's wrong with your chickens? And then I'd make you do an English accent, and you'd say, well, my chickens have worms, and I would prescribe fenbendazole because it wasn't legal in the United States to use on chickens. Well, guess what? As of a few years ago, now you can give fenbendazole to your chickens to deworm them. You're supposed to go get it from the vet. That's up to you. Okay. I can tell you that Safeguard for horses, do we have any horse people other than Karen here? Safeguard is fenbendazole. And what's really cool about it is you can't overdose your birds. In England, they would tell you to not eat the eggs for 10 days. Now, I am going to tell you my horse people are the worst ones about this. They want to deworm their chickens on a maintenance level like you do horses. You don't need to do that with chickens. Yes, they do get parasites, and occasionally they do get a big enough dose that it causes issues. Generally, you don't need to worry about it. If the birds start getting real skinny and there's no external parasites, they seem to be eating, they seem to be thirsty all the time. That's another clue. And their faces get pale. Yeah, I would probably give Betty a dose of fenbendazole. You just grab her and have somebody hold her, and you squeeze a pea-sized glob into her mouth, and you're good to go. There's no way you can overdose them. That's why it's called Safeguard. It is not a toxin. Now, you will hear people talk about ivermectin. Ivermectin is not labeled for chickens. Yes, it does work on chickens, but I'm not a fan because, yes, you can overdose your chicken. And people get caught up in a little bit's good, a lot's better. And it's not all that tough to overdose your chicken on ivermectin. You can overdose them on fenbendazole or Safeguard. The good news, too, is, well, I shouldn't say good news. The difference is ivermectin is almost immediate. It kills the worms almost immediately because it is a toxin. Fenbendazole starves the parasites to death, so it takes about a week or so to kill them, but it does clean them out. So that's what I tell my horse people is just save that little bit. You always have a little bit left in your tube. Save that for your chickens. So, and even if you have to buy a tube, and I'm sure they have that at CountryMax, it's not expensive. It is legal to do it now, although, like I say, you're supposed to get a prescription from the vet. All right, molting. Your feed sucks. All my complaints always start with that phrase. Well, what's going on? Well, I switched to your feed 6 months ago and they started losing their feathers. Okay, 6 months ago, really? Okay. So this is a normal process. It has nothing, well, it has a little bit to do with nutrition, but whether you're feeding them good food, medium food, or high-end food, it doesn't matter. They're all going to molt. Some chickens are easy molters, some are hard molters. It's an individual thing, and it's not even by breed or anything. It's just an individual thing, and everybody does it. Hens, roosters. Next slide, please. So 15 to 18 months of age, they'll start molting. They'll every once in a great while, you'll have somebody tell you they have a chicken that laid through molt, but that's not typical. They usually don't lay while they're molting. They're kind of irritable. This is not a good time to add birds to the flock or add any kind of stress to these birds. Try not to hold them unless you absolutely have to, excuse me. I'm sure it's kind of painful, those little pin feathers coming in. Next slide. So we developed this diet specifically, and it wasn't just pumping the protein up, okay? This was the amino acids were all especially developed to grow feathers. It is also a top-notch layer feed. It is a little higher protein, but again, the amino acids were especially geared towards feather growth. The show people love this feed. They feed it year-round. It is not a top dressing. It's not a supplement. It's a complete diet. It is our Rolls Royce, okay? I talked about Chevy, Cadillac. This is Rolls Royce. This is our top of the top. But it doesn't carry a Rolls Royce price tag. It's only like $1 or so more than the regular layer. So next slide, please. So we're going to tell you what the molting sequence is, just so you know where Betty is in the process. You know, oh, she's just getting started, or maybe she's almost done. So go ahead and hit your next. Where we get in hang time. Betty's going to start molting up around her head and neck. And then she's going to go down to what we call the saddle, which is her back, the thighs, that area, maybe the breast. And then lastly will be the tail. So next slide, please. All right. So one of the other issues that we probably were dealing with this past fall with all the crazy conspiracy theories were lighting. So we have the molting aspect, but chickens also need a minimum of 15, 16 hours a day, depends on who you talk to, 15 to 16 hours a day of light. If they don't have that, they stop laying. This is Mother Nature's way of telling Betty to take the winter off to recuperate. Now, up to you whether you want to do artificial lighting or not. If you want to get eggs through the winter, this may be an option for you. It's not a right or wrong. I will tell you what we do. We give our chickens the winter off, just like Mother Nature intended. And then in the spring, we add baby chicks to the flock. Every year, we add some new chickens. Your first year chickens will lay through the winter, most breeds. So the answer to all life's questions is more chickens. That's my favorite saying. So if you add chickens to your flock every winter or every spring, you will get eggs every winter. And all the other girls are taking the winter off. The young girls are laying eggs. That's one option. Maybe you can't do that. Maybe you can only have X number of chickens. So maybe you still want to get eggs in the winter time. So you may want to add lighting. So I promise you that was some of the nuttiness going on this past fall is people didn't know that. And their birds were 18 months old coming into their second, they just molted, they're coming into their second winter, and the days got shorter and they quit laying. And oh my God, the arguments on Facebook were just amazing. People would say, well, it sounds just like somebody from the feed industry saying that. And this wasn't me. I didn't touch any of those with a 10-foot pole. I didn't want to get in the middle of those fights. Anyway, that being said, it's not super hard to do. It is a pretty exact art. You're literally fooling Betty into thinking it's still summer. So if you miss a couple of days, I saw many posts that way. Somebody would dig in and say, well, were you lighting them every night? Well, I missed a couple of days. Most nights I did. And all you have to do is miss 1 or 2 days and they'll stop laying. They'll go right out of production. So it doesn't matter what kind of light. I recommend LED lights. You're not trying to produce heat. The rule of thumb is enough light to read a newspaper by. If you want to look up the lumen levels, that's up to you, but it's enough light to read a newspaper by. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. You can look locally, like your sun up and sun down times, and adjust your timer on your lighting so that you get that minimum 15, I would say 16 hours a day. Some people leave a light on all the time. I know maybe you're thinking that. You can, although studies have shown that the chickens aren't getting the REM sleep like they're supposed to, and so they may not produce as well. And I jokingly say maybe they won't do as well in school because they're not sleeping well, but they just, ideally you want a timer so they have that night so they get that REM sleep. The next slide. So, okay, go back one, Karen. One thing we also missed that wasn't in there, it's very important if you're going to do the lighting that you wake the birds up early in the morning and let them have a natural sunset. This is very, very important. The reason why is chickens, I don't know if you know this, chickens are virtually blind when it's dark. I mean, like they can't see anything. They have almost zero night vision. So Betty's cruising around, she's doing Betty things, and click, the light goes out. She can't see to fly up on her perch. They feel safe up on the perch. If she doesn't feel safe, her perception is she doesn't feel safe, it stresses her, she may stop laying. She also may get cold sleeping down there on the floor of the coop. So you want to have that natural sunset so they can see to get up on the roost. The other thing is, and I am a firm believer, some people don't believe this, I believe that there's a thing called flock psyche, where chickens, they're a flock, it's a flock mentality, they do things, they have their pecking order. Going to bed is kind of an important function for them. If you've ever watched your chickens go to bed, it is like quite the process, okay? Think of high school revisited. You have your pecking order with the football players and the cheerleaders. They will be in the best roost spots up on towards the top. All the nerds will be down towards the bottom. And the reason why is if Mr. Fox comes in, okay, he's going to get one of them unimportant nerds on the bottom, not one of the football players or cheerleaders up on the top, okay? I'm making light of it, but that's just kind of how your chicken coop works, is they have that pecking order, and where they sleep at night is very important. And they go through a whole rigmarole. Oh, she's icky. I can't sleep next to her, and this whole thing. And if you ever notice, they end up in the same spot pretty much every night anyway. But they go through this, and this seems to be important to their psyche. You know, I'm a firm believer in happy chickens or healthy chickens, and healthy chickens lay more eggs. So I let my birds do that. They get that natural sunset. So next slide, please. Okay, so winterizing your coop. We've kind of touched on all this. Make sure you have the water set up right so that you can either add water to it. The other tip, if maybe you're new and you're just building your coop, one of the best tips I can give you, I live in Wisconsin. There's nothing worse than having a coop that you have to get on your hands and knees and climb in that way to get the eggs. Guess what? You're not going to do it. The eggs are just going to pile up in there and freeze and go to waste. If you are designing your coop, make it where you can walk in there. Or better yet, have a design where they lay, the eggs roll out, you can open up a flap and get the eggs that way. I will warn you, make sure you pick up your eggs early and often in the wintertime. They will freeze on you. We do very deep pine shavings. That seems to help kind of insulate them to keep them from freezing as fast. On really super cold days, you just may not be able to get out there in time to get the eggs. That just happens. And usually they crack if they fully freeze, and we just throw them away. And I recommend you throw them away because bacteria can get in there if that cracks like that. So that being said, some people like to sheet off parts of their coop with plastic. That's up to you. And the whole idea there is to try to maximize the body heat of the chickens. In most cases, you probably don't need to do it as long as they're tight and they're dry and out of the elements. So next slide, please.
Wayne, I got a
Yes.
question here.
Okay.
If we are in a warmer climate, will they keep laying in the winter time?
It has to do with lighting. It's not the heat. It's all about the lighting. So even in like Texas, California, places like that, in the wintertime, as the days get shorter, you either have to add artificial light or just have first year pullets. Otherwise, they will stop laying out there too. So the heat doesn't have any effect on that at all.
Before we move on, Twain, little break. Do you have another trivia question for us so I can give a winner a coupon for a free bag of Nutrena?
Okay. My favorite breed of chickens are naked necks. And my wife and I were watching a movie the other day, and they had naked necks in it. And we got so excited. It was a Johnny Depp movie. If anybody can tell me what movie it was, how's that? That's a hard one, too. It's because it's one of his obscure movies. It was in the final scene of the movie. My wife goes, "Oh my God, naked necks." And we had to rewind it and watch it again. How about an easier one? What country do naked necks come from? 3 acceptable answers, actually. Nope, not India. And not Turkey. I know somebody's going to say that because they call them Turkins. Nope, not Crybaby. That's obscure, though. This one's more obscure, though. Nope. Oh my God, you're getting really obscure. No, but no. Think, okay, if you're a Johnny Depp fan, this may give it away. Think Jack the Ripper. Okay, hold on. Pirates of the Caribbean. That's not the right answer, but there was a chicken in Pirates of the Caribbean, and I'm one of these weirdos. Karen, you're probably a weirdo with horses. Does it bother from hell? Somebody got it. Megan got it. That was the Johnny Depp movie with naked necks. But Pirates of the Caribbean, they had chickens, and it's obviously a period piece. And the chickens were like 200 years off, 250 years off. They weren't developed yet. So my wife watches a movie and there's horses in it. Like she saw that Antonio Banderas, the 13th Warrior, and they were all riding draft horses, and that just set her off because they were the wrong horses. I'll be in a theater and I'll go, wrong chickens. My wife won't go to the movies with me anymore, by the way. So, yes, Pirates of the Caribbean, they also had a gold comet, and those were not developed until like the 1940s or 50s in that. But I'm probably the only person in America that watches a movie and cares if the chickens are the right breed or not. All right. So, many breeds to choose from. Some of them do better in the winter than others. You can tell by the name a lot of times, like Delaware was definitely a northern bird developed for cold weather. That is a totally unsung bird. You don't see them that often in the hatcheries and stuff. Um, I don't know if CountryMax gets those or not. They're a real nice bird. They're real big, white bird with black lacing around the neck. They lay, depends on who you talk to, the largest brown egg. Some people will tell you that's a Russian Orloff that does that, but I think it's a Delaware. Dominiques, they look like kind of like a barred rock, and the stripes are going the wrong way, and the comb's different. They were also known as the Pilgrim chicken, or the first American non-sporting breed of chicken. Up until Queen Victoria, everything was bred for fighting. The Dominique was America's first non-fighting breed. In fact, when we watched 1883, I was all excited because I figured, what's his name? Taylor Sheridan's known for being super accurate. When they crossed to go to the Oregon Trail, a lot of those wagon trains, they had chickens, and they were typically Dominiques, and they just followed the wagon train. They were called the chicken that won the West. Not very friendly, but they make great ranch chickens. Jersey Giants, kind of a jack of all trades, master of none. Great big giant bird, lays little eggs, and not a lot of them. But they're real friendly. They're real sweet. Orpingtons have probably replaced the Rhode Island Red is America's favorite backyard chicken. They're kind of the golden retriever of the chicken world. They're super, super sweet. They're pretty good chickens too. It's a British bird. Plymouth Barred Rock, another that's a Massachusetts bird, another cold hardy bird. And then, of course, the Rhode Island Red. True or false, is the Rhode Island Red the state bird of Rhode Island? Anybody? Give a prize away for that one, too. 50-50 shot, guys. No, that's actually true. It is the state bird of Rhode Island. And then the Wyandotte. Anybody know? Tell me what American poet was a huge Wyandotte fan? That'd be worthy of a prize. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. If anybody gets that, just put it in the chat. So some of these, like frizzles and silkies, they can survive a Northeast winter. They're just not as cold hardy as the others. And I've been labeled as a silky hater. I'm not. I don't like silkies for a beginner as their first chicken. In fact, my seminar rooster for many years was a rescued silkie named Spike. So I don't hate silkies, just as a beginner's bird. And then the other thing I see people do with silkies and frizzles and Polish, they get a flock of chickens and they give one of these. And Polish is maybe the worst. They have that headdress or that crest. And the other birds tend to pick on them. And this is very, very common. And there is a reason. Chickens, remember, let's go back to that flock psyche, flock mentality. Flock's only as strong as the weakest member. And the flock also doesn't like a lot of attention drawn to it, especially if they're out free ranging. And Betty's got this giant thing on her head, and it's waving around and causing all kinds of, attention to be drawn to them. And so they kind of tell Betty, either you do something about that or we're going to do something for you. And what they'll usually do is they'll pull that thing out. They'll pull that crest off of her head, none too gently. A lot of times it kills Betty. So your options are either don't get them. If you want to raise Polish, just get all Polish. Getting one, she's going to get picked on more than likely. Not always. Once in a while you get a real dominant one, but they also can't see very well. So they do tend to get picked on. And frizzles and silkies are kind of the same way. They're a little bit smaller. They tend to get picked on. So Isa Brown is a great cold weather bird. That's a French bird. It's a French commercial brown layer, and they are great cold weather birds. People call them a quart of vanilla ice cream because they're just this kind of buff colored big chicken, but they're super smart. They're super sweet. They're a sex link, so they're a hybrid. They're real smart. I'm a big fan of Isa Browns, actually. So next slide.
We had one guess of Doubleday. I believe that was the poet, maybe.
Oh, no. I was looking at that and I was thinking of Doubleday in baseball. I forgot he was there's a poet. No, Robert Frost was a huge Wyandotte fan. How about ducks? I don't know if we have any duck owners out there. Ducks do really, really well in the winter time. Here in the Midwest, you'll drive by a pond that's more ice than water, and they'll be swimming around in it and bathing in it. And during the polar vortex, our ducks, literally 2 days they spent in the coop, and the rest of it they were outside, and they wanted their pond back. They were so mad at my wife because she wouldn't put the pond out because it was so cold. They're kind of bulletproof when it comes to cold weather. You feed them about the same way. Make sure you're feeding them an actual designated duck feed. Oh, there we go. The reason why is chicken feed, especially for the male ducks, the drakes, has way too much calcium and can actually poison them and kill them. And you don't hear too much about that. Neighbor's duck, Daffy, drops dead one day. Odds are they're not going to take that duck to the vet and have it necropsied to see what happened and find out that Daffy got calcium poisoning. There's just too much calcium in layer feed for male ducks. Female ducks probably do okay, but the males not so much. So we developed these two, the starter feed on the right and the adult food on the left, from the ground up to be duck feeds. They're higher in niacin, lower in calcium. They were formulated for lower mycotoxins. Mycotoxins are the fungus that you get in grain, and ducks are hypersensitive to that. Chickens deal with it pretty well, but ducks not at all. So we formulated so it has low mycotoxins, praying probiotics. We had 4 nationally known duck breeders help us with this, and they were very like set in their ways. If we did not follow every single guideline, they would not help us. And so we did, and we followed it. And designed from the ground up to be duck feed. So you feed the starter feed for about the first 4 or 5 weeks, and then the adult for the rest of their life. So, and they have both of those at CountryMax, and they're not expensive. They're both doing very, very well in the show world. When the show people adopt a feed or start using a feed a lot, it tells you that's a good feed because they're willing to spend more money on a feed. Now, if they can find one like the Country Feeds Duck that's not expensive, that's perfect. They love that. But like the Feather Fixer is a little more expensive, but they use that very extensively. That kind of speaks volumes about that feed.
So
Next slide, please. Oh, go ahead.
We're actually going to go into some marketing stuff now. Does anybody have any specific questions that we haven't covered for Twain? Twain, I have one for you.
Okay.
I had a question from a consumer this week that was wondering, since they are getting so many feathers right now in their coop and around the coop, what should they do with those? What do you suggest? Cleaning them out, leaving them there?
Some people, I don't like to leave them because they can harbor disease and parasites and things like that. So I would recommend they just rake them up and put them in the trash, or you can compost them. So, but I'm not a fan of leaving those in the coop or the run. So,
Thank you. Couple other ones here. What size roosting bar do you recommend for Rhode Island Reds?
well, one of the tricks I learned for super cold weather is you don't really want to have, I mean, your natural instinct is something like a broomstick that's round. Well, you're better off to have something that's more flat because then the bird, when she sets down on it, her feathers are covering her toes. A lot of people will use a 2x4 and they have it so they're roosting on that flat piece, and so their toes get covered by the bird. So usually they say about 18 inches wide per chicken. And Rhode Island Reds are pretty good sized birds. I hope that answered your question. No, you don't have to clean the feathers daily. I would say you could do that. We clean our coop 4 times a year. You know, if you clean them out every couple of months. So you can do it more if you like, if that makes you feel better. But I don't. You're only going to really see a lot of feathers right after they molt. And then yes, you can wrap it with plastic or tarp. Now, make sure you leave a small vent somewhere in that coop. You will always see that. They'll talk about your coop should be well ventilated, but not drafty, but they never explain that. Okay, I'm going to explain it. You need a little bit of ventilation to let the moisture out. As the birds breathe, they put moisture in the air, and if that can't escape, you're more likely to get frostbite. So if you sheet it off with plastic or something, just make sure you have a vent. You don't want the vent above or next to where they're roosting. They may move if they're getting a breeze on them at night when they're trying to sleep, and you don't want them sleeping on the floor. They'll probably get cold on the floor and they don't feel safe. So small vent, and that's especially if you're wrapping it with plastic or something, you definitely don't want to make it airtight. So.
A couple other ones. Does having a
Okay.
rooster make any difference in general and in weather?
There's a lot of pros to a rooster. I think there's more cons to a rooster than pros. First off, right out of the gate. Okay, here's another one for a pro. Do you have more coupons, Karen?
Sure do.
Okay, what's the right ratio of hens to roosters? How many hens, minimum number of hens you should have for one rooster? Okay, you're really, really close with 10. You're a little high with 23. I would say give it to the person that said 10. That's real close. It's 12 to 18 is the right ratio. So, and I'm sure there's some that's somewhat subjective. Uh, what happens if you don't have enough hens? And I know I'm very, very aware we may have some kids on here. I'll keep it G-rated, but if you don't have enough hens, he is going to do what we call overmount the girls or overmount the hens, and he'll end up tearing up their backs. And that stresses them and they can quit laying. And not that doesn't even take into consideration a lot of times he will have some hens that are his favorites that he's going to breed more anyway. So their backs can get torn up. So you need that great big harem of girls for him to keep him happy. So, and they don't get torn up. I think closing the windows will be enough. We don't have, like I say, our coop's not insulated or anything. I don't think you need to put plastic over it. If it's a glass window, I think you should be fine.
Twain, we have a question also from Carol. Is it normal if a broody hen hatches fertile chick eggs we purchase, but then after they hatch, she stopped laying eggs?
Yeah, she'll stop laying. She should go back to laying, but depending on her age, you will, especially if she's a bantam or a silky or something like that. Sometimes you'll get a bird that's all they want to do. They just want to produce baby chicks. They don't want to do anything else. But it's very normal for a hen. She lays her clutch of eggs, she hatches them, she weans them. It may take her another 6, 8 weeks before she starts laying again. Raising the babies is kind of hard on them, their body condition and stuff. So yeah, that's kind of normal. What you're saying, to say that she never lays again, I've seen that, but that's not too common. Usually they will start back up again, but sometimes they only lay enough eggs to set on again. So leaving the coop door open, yeah, maybe too cold. And my bigger concern is predators. You're going to want to make sure you can button that door up every night. One bad night, you can lose your whole flock. Raccoon, I don't know about New York, Wisconsin. Raccoons are public enemy #1, and one bad night, and they'll kill them all. So make sure you're going to want to close that door. Are your 6 hens in the process of molting, or is this just an ongoing thing where they just constantly have feathers missing? If it's an ongoing thing, you probably have 1 or 2 birds that are feather picking, and that it's kind of a I don't know what you're feeding. I'm not going. I don't want to go down that road too far because I'm just throwing some possibilities out. Um, Feeding for example, if you were only feeding scratch, it's very common for them to feather pick because they're looking for more protein. And chickens are omnivores and they do eat meat. And by the way, they will eat chicken and they will eat each other if necessary. So if they're not getting enough protein, they may start feather picking and then it becomes a habit and they develop a habit. So if they're not molting and they constantly have feathers, and especially if you're seeing a little bit of blood, you probably have 1 bird that's feather picking and she's maybe taught some of the other birds to do it, and you may have to take measures to stop it. There's a product, I've only ever seen it online. They're called pinless peepers. They look like little plastic spectacles that you put on the end of her beak over her nostrils. Commercially, with pheasants, they would put a pin through those nostrils, and it's more or less permanent. The pinless doesn't have the pin, it just clips on. And so now she can only see side to side. So this also will stop egg eating, but it also stops feather picking. So that may be an option. You can also trim the beaks. Now hold on before anybody gets upset. I'm not talking about commercially where they chop half the beak off. You could just take the point of the top beak off. It'll grow back. But in the meantime, she can't eat off the ground. She has to eat out of a trough. They can't eat off the ground if you pull that. But if you take the tip of that top beak off, a lot of times that'll stop the feather picking. It'll grow back in about 6 weeks. So pinless peepers. Yeah, I think it's PIN. Yes,
Thank
that's
you.
it. All right. Any other questions? Or did I miss any?
I think we got them all. If we didn't, my email is in here and I can certainly get with Twain if I can't answer the question for you. So
Kind
I
of
just
some.
wanted to mention
Oh,
a
go
couple.
ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
No,
Dwayne.
no, go ahead. I'll do my final thoughts at the end.
Okay, so I did want to mention that we have a really cool CountryMax live event coming up and a pet costume contest. This picture is, I believe Kelly said, of the winner at the live contest or the online?
The winner of the online contest
Last year. So the lot there, you can enter online with pictures of any of your pets. Doesn't have to be chickens. But I will actually be at the live event at the Henrietta store next Saturday, October 21st. If you're interested in bringing any of your pets down with costumes, registration starts at 9 and the event begins at 10. Stop by my table and mention that you were on our call here, and I probably will have an extra little goodie for you. But please check out that online costume contest, get entered. I think there's some great prizes you can win.
Yep, online is $100 gift card, and
Ooh.
there are a couple of different gift cards. I believe the top 3 people win some sort of gift card, and then the in-person live event, you can win up to a $300 gift card. So it's free to enter, and it's just a really great time. We've had a lot of fun with this over the years.
And this is my first one. And Kelly was telling me today they had over 100 entrants last year at the live event. So even if you are not going to bring your pet down, stop by, costume or not, and check out some great things we got going on at the Henrietta store. So that's one. Secondly, Nutrena has a great trial program going on right now. So if you would like to try NatureWise, not free, but with a $10 off discount, I'm going to kind of tell you how to do that here. You can register for this trial, and it's at Nutrena World /count on a difference. I'll type that in the chat here in a minute, but you will get a $10 off coupon, and you will continue to get coupons if you try the NatureWise product or use it and give us a short review within 30 days of how the food worked for you, what you liked about it. There's a limit of 1 coupon per customer on a 40-pound or larger bag, and the coupon will be valid for 21 days after you print it offline. So I'm going to take a minute here and type in this in the chat, or just go to NutrenaWorld.com, and I think under poultry you will see where you can enter this great trial. So at this point, I think we are done. Any final comments, Twain? Sorry.
Yeah. If you're new to chickens, this is a real fun hobby. Don't let some bully on Facebook scare you out of this hobby. In fact, while there is a lot of great info online, there's a lot of, as I was talking about the crazy conspiracy theories, there's a lot of info that's less than accurate. So CountryMax is a great source if you have questions, problems, concerns. If they don't know, they can get a hold of us. If I don't know, I have sources I can go to. We will try to get your question answered for you. But please don't be afraid to ask a question. That nobody at CountryMax is going to judge you or make fun of you for asking what you may think is a dumb question. As I said, there's no such thing. So enjoy the hobby. It's very rewarding. It's a lot of fun. I'm just going to tell you, it's probably going to happen. You may lose a bird here and there. That's very normal. Yeah, it's sad, but you just keep going. It does happen. It happens to all of us. So have fun with it. And thank you for joining us tonight. I really, really enjoyed it presenting tonight. So.
Yeah, thank you everybody for coming, and thank you so much, Twain and Karen, for being here.
Thank you, everyone. And we'll get this recording and the slide notes to Kelly so she can post it out there in case do you just want to go back and review? And I hope to see some of you next Saturday at the Pet Halloween contest. Thanks and have a great evening, guys.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Good night.